In the early 1800s, Baltimore was still a young American city, and the United States was still defining what its institutions would become. Medicine looked very different then. There were no antibiotics, no advanced imaging, certainly no organ transplantation, and no genomic medicine. And AI wasn't helping researchers ask new questions. But here in Baltimore, a group of physicians believed medicine should be taught through science, observation, and hands on learning. And that belief helped give rise to what is now the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And more than 2 centuries later, you can still walk into one of the places where that story began, Davidge Hall. As the United States marks its 250th anniversary, we're looking at UMB's place in that larger American story, not just through buildings and dates, but through the people, collections, and discoveries and ideas that shaped medicine, health, law, social work, pharmacy, dentistry, nursing, and public service. Today, we're going into the archives with someone who helps preserve and uncover those stories. Tara Wink is a historical collections librarian and archivist with the Health Sciences and Human Services Library at UMB. Her work helps connect today's students, researchers, and the public with the records, books, artifacts, and stories that show how UMB's past continues to inform its present. I'm Dana Rampola, and we are celebrating UMB's impact on America on this edition of the UMB Pulse.
You're listening to the heartbeat of the University of Maryland, Baltimore, the UMB Pulse.
So, Tara, welcome to the UMB Pulse.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Before we get into some of your stories, I want to start with your work. When people hear historical collections librarian and archivist, they may picture old books, dusty boxes, or things locked away in a vault. But what does your job actually look like? What are you helping people discover?
Well, there are a fair number of old books and dusty materials, so it's not too far off, but there's so much more that's involved in historical collections and archives. I do have collections of rare books that are unique. Some maybe one of few volumes available in the world. Our oldest book is actually 1497, something everybody asks. But we do have a really great collection of archival materials that truly tells the history of UMB. I usually say my job is to collect and tell the history of the University of Maryland, Baltimore, as well as some of the other schools that existed along with UMB and then merged with us. So it's a really diverse history that spans over 200 years and is pretty much intertwined with the city as well. Yeah. I do I do get to work with a lot of different people. So I get to work with people at the university, but I also get to work with people outside of UMB. A lot of the questions that I answer are community questions. So genealogical questions about family members who have gone to school here, things like that. But there's a lot of different conversations that happen and things that I get to do as an archivist. It's not just reading books or, hoarding, if you will. It's a lot more really telling the history, getting the information out there in different capacities. So through things like this, or blog posts, or social media posts, digitization is also really big. So there's a lot of technology involved in archives as well. We scan materials and we put them out onto the internet so that people can access them without having to come to UMB, and that's been a game changer in the world of archives. It allows people to interact with things that they could only do by coming to campus at one point. So that's a big part of my job as well, is getting more and more resources available online and accessible for people around the world.
And when someone comes to you with a research question from either here in Baltimore or around the world, like you said, how do you help them start to look for answers?
So it really depends on the type of question that's being asked. And usually a lot of our questions involve our graduates. And we do have a database of our graduates in the library that we've created through a variety of different sources. We have a collection of commencement programs. We have catalogs. academic catalogs that tell you like the course requirements, the costs, as well as the students that attended, newspaper articles. So we've used those to create a database that people can search for our graduates. And it's pretty up to date. And again, a lot is available online. So I can, search our digital archive for a variety of different things. And that's ultimately usually where I start because most of our questions can be answered through things like our annual catalog, the yearbooks, newsletters, things like that are available online. And then it involves physically digging through papers. And I have a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of spreadsheets and archives, as well as things called finding aids. And finding aids are what we create so that users know what we have in our collections and how they can be used and how they're organized. So there's a few finding aids available online that people can look through and see, what collections contain.
The archives aren't just a museum of the past, they're really a way of asking new questions about the past.
Correct. Yeah, I think there's so many different research questions that you can ask from one object. Our oldest book, for example, is our oldest book. It's from 1497. It's an example of incunabula, which is any book published before 1500. So there's that kind of research you can do with it. You can do the research on the topic. It's an anatomy text, but then it also has a really interesting story behind it too. So there's all kinds of different avenues that you can take with just one object or one collection. So yeah, any number of questions can be answered.
And you mentioned stories, so let's jump into that. UMB was founded in 1807, just a few decades after the founding of the United States. When we talk about UMB in the context of America's 250th anniversary, what should people understand about the world that UMB was born into?
Well, if you think about it, 1807 is only 31 years after the founding of our country. So our country is very much still in its infancy. Yes, there had been people here in the United States from Europe and other nations before that. And of course, like Native Americans were here as well. But our country is founded in 1776. UMB is founded in 1807. It's not much after that young country was established. So there's still a lot of unknowns about what is this country going to look like? What are we going to be as a nation? And we don't even have our national anthem yet. Our national anthem is written in 1814. So I mean, UMB is a predecessor is before our national anthem. It's something like unique about us. Baltimore was actually established in 1729, so it is an older city and it's the third biggest city at the time. And it was established where it was because of access to water. So there's a lot of shipping, a lot of people coming into the city because there was access for them. And water is wonderful, but it also brings a lot of issues. And at the time, if we're thinking about what it is, it's a medical institution. And so diseases are carried by water. Diseases are there because of mosquitoes, because of new people coming in and bringing different infections and stuff like that. So while water was an important aspect of Baltimore, it also did give rise to the need for medicine, medical care. Also, sanitation. We didn't understand sanitation like we do today. Water was very easily contaminated by animal, human, industry waste. We just didn't understand that you can't dump things into water and then drink it and not get sick. There isn't a sanitation like we have today. No electricity. It was gas powered materials and lights, candle, coal. So dirty. I hate to say, but the city was dirty, and most cities were. It wasn't unique to Baltimore. It was actually safer to drink like beer or liquor instead of water because of all of these different things. And medical knowledge and medical profession was also very much in its infancy. We didn't understand how diseases were spread. Germ theory wasn't existing. We didn't get it. And so UMB is established in that, wanting to learn more about the human body and health and making sure people are safe and hoping to keep life expectancy longer. I'm actually 41, and that would have been old in 1807. So, I mean, the life expectancy is very much different from what it is today. A lot of infants didn't make it through infancy, just a different world, and UMB
Well,
is born into that.
and you talked about illness and about people just not knowing. So what was actual medical education like then at that time?
So UMB is the fifth oldest medical school in the country. It's the first public medical school. The first school was established in 1765. So it's still like the US, it's in its infancy. They're still not sure what medical education needs to entail. UMB was unique in the founders believed that dissection and anatomy was very important to learning about the body. So they very early on made it compulsory, and a lot of other schools didn't have that requirement. They didn't have opening up the body and looking through it and learning about it as something that was necessary to understand it. Also, a lot of doctors didn't have a degree. So a lot of the medical professionals in this country didn't have a formal education. So it wasn't viewed as necessary to be a doctor until later. In Baltimore alone, there is a medical society. So MedChi is here in Baltimore, and it's the state medical society. It was founded in 1799. At the time of its founding, only 19% of its members actually had a medical degree. So think about that. You're talking about a prestigious medical society, and they're recognizing the importance of medicine in Baltimore, and they're also the ones driving medical education in Baltimore, and only 19% of the members had any sort of formal degree. So, how did you get it? How did you become a doctor? You apprentice with other people who were practicing it, and who knows where they got their education, where they got their information, and you were learning from that. So it was like a passed down type tradition, and the founders of UMB recognized that no, this was an important thing and we needed to have some sort of degree so that you could trust doctors.
So UMB's founding wasn't just a local milestone, it was part of a larger moment when the country was still building its professional and scientific and civic institutions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. One of the most visible links to that early history that we have here on campus is Davidge Hall, which opened in 1812, and it's still part of UMB today, undergoing a big renovation at the moment. For someone who's never visited Davidge Hall, what was it built to do?
So it was really meant to do everything for the school. It was a building that it was the only building on campus. It was the only space available. So what does a university or a college do? It educates. So there was space for education. So there still are two very large lecture halls, chemical hall and anatomical hall, which were meant so students could learn from a faculty member. It's in this amphitheater seating, so kinda like this, students sat up, and then faculty was on the ground lecturing up. It allowed for some, like, showcasing, so you could presumably dissect a person there. They weren't doing that. Again, I alluded to this earlier where dissection was something that you had to do in private. And actually, John Beale Davidge was one of our founders. Davidge Hall wasn't called Davidge Hall to begin with. We actually named it in honor of him much later on. But the hall was built in response to he had his own space in his house, and he was teaching dissection, and the townspeople found out and destroyed his home because they were so upset and outraged by somebody dissecting a body, for any sort of use or purpose. It wasn't again, the body was sacred, and there's religious tones to that as well. So, Davidge Hall had private entrances and passageways and hidden staircases so that they could easily move bodies into the building and then hide the students and faculty who were performing dissections for anatomical study.
Interesting.
And this happened until, the 1880s when anatomy law was passed, allowing for access to bodies for medical use. So, good portion of our time as an institution, this had to be done in private, and they had to acquire bodies in ways that were illegal or maybe not ethical, well, definitely not ethical, in order to and ethical by today's standards anyway. At the time, like, it's what you had to do in order to learn. Um, so Davidge Hall was built in order to allow for this type of activity. The walls are very thick, uh, brick. It was cold because there's no central heating, there's no electricity, so it's cold, and there's that smoke in the air from the heating component, but also from candles and oil lamps, so think about that smell along with human bodies being dissected. So much like the city, it's not ideal for today by today's standards, but that's what it was built for and built to handle. Um, there was a library. Our library was first in that building as well, and that was established in 1813. Um, but it also was a space for faculty to be and students to be and learn.
Wow, you've touched on so many interesting. I did not know that he actually conducted dissections in his home. And as a former bio major who did a lot of anatomy, including dissecting a cadaver, that just,
Oh my goodness, I didn't do
I
that.
mean, I just think how I felt that day walking into class and to think about having that, in your living room. Come on in, students, let's learn here. That's overwhelming and incredibly interesting. When people walk into that building now, they're walking into so much history that you wouldn't know just to walk through the door. I've been in there and I didn't even know that little piece. So thank you for sharing all that.
Absolutely. I'm by no means an authority on Davidge Hall, but it is such a unique building, and the fact that it's still being used for the purpose of education is, it makes me so happy, and the fact and that getting the renovation that it so desperately needs. It's really a treasure on our campus, but also for Baltimore and the country.
That it's been there for more than 200 years,
Yeah,
from what you said. Another story that I love about the library's history begins with a physician's book collection, which is very different from what we've been talking about. And that sounds maybe small at first, just one collection, but it did become something much bigger. Can you tell that story?
absolutely. I did allude to this. Davidge Hall did have a library, and that library was established in 1813, and the HSHSL traces our history to that date as well. So the HSHSL is over 200 years old as well. That collection was actually purchased from Dr. Crawford, John Crawford. He was a physician in Baltimore. He was actually born in Ireland in 1746. Spent some time in the Navy as a physician, surgeon, and then came to Baltimore in 1796. Prior to his connection to UMB, he was a vaccine physician and was responsible for vaccinating for smallpox, which was at that time actually revolutionary and important, relatively new vaccine. So he was a vaccine physician in Baltimore. And he was also instrumental in establishing Baltimore dispensary, kind of like an early hospital for people who could not afford medical care. So poor people could get the medical care they needed. And he was one of the founders in 1801. So before UMB, he believed or was studying a concept which today doesn't seem so foreign, but at the time was revolutionary, and it did lose him some trust and relationships in the medical world. The theory was that diseases were caused by little insects or worms, close to germ theory, if you will. So that's what he believed, and he was studying beginning in, I believe it was 1807. And he studied that until his death in 1813. And again, the medical profession just couldn't wrap their head around this early germ theory concept. So he did die relatively poor as a result, but he was hired by UMB to be a lecturer in natural history. That's his connection to the University of Maryland School of Medicine. So he was a faculty member until his death in 1813. He was also a bibliophile, and he had a wonderful collection of volumes on medicine, but more centrally focused on natural history. So medicine and natural history kind of go hand in hand. And the faculty of the School of Medicine understood the value of this collection, and at his death, purchased it from his daughter, Liza Godefroy, for $500. So it's actually pretty expensive at the time. I don't have the exact numbers by today's money, but it wasn't nothing. It was roughly, we don't actually know all the volumes that were part of that collection. We have a lot of volumes that have his signature in them or have his bookplate in them, but the collection today is over 500 volumes. So, wow, yeah, books were added to the collection and added to the library after that initial collection was purchased. But they believe there were between 350 and 400 volumes purchased for $500. And it was believed to have been the largest medical library in Baltimore. Passed away. So, a large, important collection. The School of Medicine recognized that value and pooled their money. It was actually their personal money together to purchase this collection for the university. And there's some indication it's not, there's no proof, and it's hard to prove this, that our library is actually the first library associated with the School of Medicine, which is really, it's really inspirational, important to that our faculty recognized that a library was important for a School of Medicine.
So interesting. So you were saying that people weren't really buying into the whole germ theory at that time. So what kinds of books or materials would have mattered that he may have had in his collection to physicians and students at that time?
Sure. So there's some well-known names in his collection. It's a volume, if not two, on Hippocrates that Hippocrates had written. He wrote it and then it was transcribed. Galen, who is an anatomist, so anatomy texts, which include sketches and drawings of the human body to teach anatomy again, because dissection isn't exactly common or easy to do. So the anatomy texts were printed so that people could learn about the body. And these are, I mean, dare I say beautiful, but they are really, truly beautiful because real artists are drawing the human body and the inside of the human body, the different, the circulatory system, skeletal system, all of that is being hand drawn by artists. And they're absolutely stunning pieces. In addition to that, like I said, natural sciences, so biology, things like that are in his collection. Big names in medicine are there. So William Cullen, Albrecht von Haller, Carl von Linné, and Herman, I'm going to butcher this last name, Boehm, all are in that collection. And, so the faculty recognize the names and recognize the importance of it. So medical knowledge at the time, it was based on the four humors. So I don't remember all of those, and I'm not gonna like get through all of those, but that was the concept of like it was kind of spiritual in nature. Like if one of the four humors were out of line, then that's why you got sick. And it wasn't germ theory or anything outside of the body that was causing illness, but it was something within you. So bloodletting techniques to get rid of that evil or that kind of thing was what was in these volumes.
Tara, one thing that surprised me is that UMB has a number of ties to presidential history, and they're not just about presidents visiting Baltimore or sending letters, which we learned so much about in, elementary and middle school, but they were physicians connected to the School of Medicine. There were physicians connected to the School of Medicine who actually cared for US presidents. So I'd love it if you would share some of like who those people are and what their stories tell us about UMB's national reach.
Sure. I actually wrote a blog post about this a couple of years ago and highlighted two doctors and one dentist who were private physicians to our founding fathers or US presidents. The most notable was Dr. Robley Dungleson. He was a School of Medicine faculty member from 1833 to 1836. He was actually dean of the School of Medicine from 1834 to 1835. He was from England, but educated in Germany and came over to the United States where he was recruited to found the University of Virginia's medical school. So through that, he was recruited by President Thomas Jefferson to found the school. And then he became the private physician to President Jefferson through his life and was actually by his bedside when he passed away. And rumor has it that President Jefferson was afraid of doctors, but he had a profound respect for Dr. Dungleson, and actually Dr. Dungleson changed his view of doctors, and I guess there might have even been a friendship there. After being the physician to President Jefferson, he also later was to President Monroe, President Jackson, and Madison, and all of those were through his connection with UVI. So that initial connection, that initial trust that President Jefferson had for him led to him being a physician to three other presidents of the United States, which happened to also be founding fathers of this country. The other doctor was Dr. James Julius Richardson. He was actually a graduate of the School of Medicine, class of 1889. He set a practice in DC after traveling to Europe to get additional medical education, which was not uncommon to go and like experience medicine in Europe after getting a degree here, kind of like doing your residency is today. And then he returned to
Think about that back then, traveling
yeah,
to Europe
I
and
know.
different than, doing
1889, you're traveling across across
Right.
the Atlantic on a ship that was not moving very fast. So unbelievable. And the money that you would have to do that too. This wasn't something that a common person could afford. Yeah. I wish that a time traveling thing existed because boy would it help make my job easier. There's so many questions. But anyway, I digress. So he came back to DC to set up practice and then became the personal physician and throat specialist to President William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Warren G. Harding. So he traveled with those candidates and helps ease their throat and teach them how to be good speakers and use their voice for oration and bringing people together in their political campaigns.
That is so interesting. Who would even think that they would rely on someone to help them do that, who's also a doctor teaching them to take care of themselves so they can do all of those things, I'm sure, and to stay healthy on the campaign trail or the political forefront at that time.
It's yeah, it's a different side of being a medical professional for sure. Yeah.
Well, let's move away from the political talk and
Yeah, please.
okay. Shifting gears a little bit back, we talked about UMB's past. So let's tie that a little bit to current times. The university's story obviously didn't stop way back in 200 years ago. So when you think about the thread from Davidge Hall to today, what are one or two examples that show that legacy continuing?
So certainly hands-on learning, service learning is there. There's lots of examples throughout history of UMB faculty, students, staff providing service to this country. During World Wars I and II, UMB and Johns Hopkins University actually established general hospitals. It was actually General Hospital number 42 in both wars that were primarily staffed by physicians, nurses, dentists, pharmacists from UMB and Hopkins. And they served to help the Allies save their soldiers and keep them healthy. They built tent hospitals in different parts of the world to provide that service. So I mean, service is an important part of UMB's history as well. I mean, we see it today too, in the way that we stepped up during COVID to provide vaccines, to lead vaccine research. There's other examples of that throughout our history, and it can be found in the archives too.
Tara, what story am I leaving out that, you spend so much time with these materials and these stories? Is there one artifact or a document or a book or, a story of an alum possibly in that collection that still makes you pause and think? this is why this work matters.
Oh my goodness, there's so many. I had a hard time choosing just one. I mentioned earlier the oldest volume, so the oldest volume from 1497. And this actually ties back into the last response as well. The volume was for sale. It was $50, and there was a faculty member in gross anatomy. His name was Dr. Edward Bullenhuth. He believed that anatomy department should have its own library to teach students about anatomy so that they had access to the best volumes on anatomy. He found this book for sale for $50, but personally couldn't afford to spend that money at the time. It was 1930-ish, so Great Depression, not a lot of wealth. And he understood the value of this volume, so he asked his colleagues in the School of Medicine to contribute, and they did. So they were able to purchase this book from 1497, which we still have in our collection. And my favorite part about it has nothing to do with the age of the volume, but in the back, he had all of the faculty who contributed sign a piece of paper, and that is now tipped into the volume. So it's permanently part of the volume and part of the history. So I mentioned earlier, here's this volume that has many different research components to it, but that's the story behind it. That's the piece that makes me believe like it is worth having, because it is truly part of a story that shows faculty coming together, better student education. And it's still there. You can view it, touch it today. Otherwise, my personal favorite collection, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, are the yearbooks. Our yearbooks are so valuable to teaching or to understanding the history of UMB's campus. They start in 1897, so unfortunately, we don't have anything back to 1807, but they highlight not just the students and their histories, but their individualness, their personalities. They have artwork from students. They have poetry and short stories, music from the students' perspective, things that the students have actually created in these yearbooks, at least the early ones. Fortunately, most of the schools stopped publishing them in the early 2010s. And though it's a piece that's over 100 years of history that we no longer get, but it's so important to understanding the student experience at UMB. And they are always my favorite, no matter where I've worked. I've always loved yearbooks. They're controversial, because think about how much has changed in 100 years, and what was okay at one point isn't okay today. But that's still an important part of learning about our institution.
And history is history. We can't,
No,
better or worse, we can't erase it. We can just move on and, learn from it, grow from it, all of that.
correct.
Tara, before we head out, I want to ask you one parting question. During America's 250th anniversary, which is why we decided to do this episode, what do you hope people understand about UMB's role in the country's story?
In the grand scheme of things, UMB is kind of small, right? But there's so many phenomenal doctors, pharmacists, dentists, nurses, social workers, and lawyers that have come out of our school and gone to the far reaches of the world to do great things. So we are very much an integral part in America's history. We've had impacts across the world, across medicine, pharmacy, all the other areas that we serve. And even the smallest piece is important. It's why I do what I do. I want to collect everything from like the well-known doctors and the well-known medical changes to the little-known story of the common student who just, came, was a doctor, and lived a normal life. I think all stories matter, all voices matter, and they can all influence change.
The UMB Pulse with
Well,
Charles
thank you,
Chalet
Tara,
and
for
Dana
helping to
Rampola
bring
is a
these
UMB
stories to
Office
life,
of
and
Communications
thank you for the
and
work
Public
that you
Affairs
do
production.
preserving
Edited
them.
by Charles Chalet, marketing
Thank you
by
for
Dana
having me.
Rampola.
It was my pleasure to share just a little bit of what I have and what
The UMB Pulse with Charles Chalet and Dana Rampolla is a UMB Office of Communications and Public Affairs production. Edited by Charles Chalet, marketing by Dana Rampolla.